Breaking news in baseball, New York Mets all-star closer Edwin Diaz expected to miss the season with a knee injury. GM Billy Epler said Diaz tore the patellar tendon in his right knee on Wednesday, celebrating Puerto Rico's win over the Dominican Republic at the World Baseball Classic. Diaz is set to have surgery on Thursday. Let's welcome in our baseball insider, Jim Bowden, and our analyst, Will Middlebrooks. So we were watching it last night. I know we all were. Puerto Rico produced a huge upset at the World Baseball Classic against the Dominican Republic. Watching the celebration, and you see Edwin Diaz go down. We didn't know the extent, but now the news is out there. A torn patellar tendon in his right knee, out for the season. Jim, not a good diagnosis. It's a huge loss for the Mets. Your initial thoughts?
Yeah, it certainly is. Dr. David Alchek is actually going to do the operation today, but he is out for the season, according to general manager Billy Epler. So it's a real blow, of course, to the New York Mets, who just signed him to a 5-year, $102 million deal. He was the best closer in the National League last year, arguably also in the Major League. So that's going to be a huge blow for the New York Mets, and for them, first, they're going to look at their in-house candidates to replace him. That would be David Robertson or Adam Ottavino, or maybe a combination of both. But this injury is so significant. And with a team that won 101 games last year, a team that's capable of going back to the World Series, they're going to probably have to make a trade at some point to replace Diaz on the roster for this year. Now, some early names that I've heard already, Daniel Bard of the Colorado Rockies, David Bednar of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and both Scott Barlow and maybe even Aroldis Chapman of the Kansas City Royals. But I don't think there's any question this is a significant injury, and the New York Mets front office is going to have to react on this.
Yeah, Will, what's your initial take on the diagnosis there? And I know we just heard from Jim on his thoughts of the options the Mets have at closer. What's your side?
Yeah, so I reached out to a couple guys on the team that I'm close with last night, and I said, how bad is it? I'm hoping it was just like I rolled his ankle or something minor, and it was just like one of those low pain tolerance type deals. And my buddy said, hey, his kneecap wasn't where it should be. So we were hoping that it was just a dislocation of the kneecap. Nothing was torn, because that is a possibility with that knee-to-knee contact in the scrum. Such a freak accident. But unfortunately, the news today of the tear, Jim covered it. I mean, we're going to see a combination of Adam Ottavino and David Robertson, maybe saves by committee by that bullpen. Don't be surprised to see Cohen out there going and buying somebody, trading someone. You know how active he is with his roster. But this rotation is still very good. Verlander, Scherzer, Senga, Carrasco, Peterson. I mean, they're deep. They can pitch deep into games. They have experience. Their lineup is going to be productive as well. This is still a very good baseball team. But they're in a very tough division as well. Let's not forget about the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. And even without Bryce Harper, the Phillies are good. Luckily for the Mets, there's only 52 divisional games this year instead of 76 like it has been in past seasons. But they're definitely in a tough spot right now.
Not a great diagnosis. You saw the tears from his brother as he was getting carried off the field, and obviously now finding out what the future holds for the Mets. And Will just mentioned it. There are such high hopes for this Mets team. Jim, what does shifting their bullpen do to their overall chances at success this season?
Yeah, look, I think, and you make a great point, and so does Will. There's 3 teams in the National League East that are capable of winning 100 games this year, winning the division, and actually winning the World Series, with the Braves, the Phillies, and the Mets as well. Now, for the Mets, though, the challenge is the bullpen, because quite frankly, they had the impact closer in Diaz, but the Philadelphia Phillies and Atlanta Braves have deeper bullpens than they do. They're better prepared for injuries than the Mets have been. And so arguably, the Braves and Phillies were going to have an advantage against the Mets in innings 6 and 7, which are 2 critical innings when you have teams that are capable of winning 100 games. So I think that not only do they need quality, but I think the Mets are going to need depth. But I think Will really nailed it when he said owner Steve Cohen, he wants to win. He doesn't care about how big his payroll is. And his GM, Billy Epler, is in a lot of pressure to win, and win now with the team that they have, especially when you have 2 40-year-old aces in Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. But there's no doubt this is a huge setback for the Mets, at least to start the year.
Now, Will, I know you have incredibly strong feelings about this. You believe that the World Baseball Classic is great for the sport of baseball. But how will this impact teams allowing players to play in the WBC?
It won't at all. This is a freak accident. This isn't a guy going out there and being overused. I think the WBC did a great job by setting a pitch count at 65 for guys to limit that exact reason of teams overusing players when it's this early, when it's March 15th. There's still guys out there throwing 102, as we saw from Duvall yesterday. He plays for the San Francisco Giants. I'm sure they were wincing a little bit at home watching him max out, but a lot of these guys, especially the Latin players, play winter ball to ramp up for this. So they're not as early in their progression as the American players may be. And you see that with the American roster, very offensive heavy with the superstars, not so much with the pitching because the pitchers don't play as much winter ball. They're not ramped up. Their pitch count isn't up. And they understand they can't go into these playoff type atmosphere and blow out. They understand that. But a lot of these Latin guys are ramped up and ready to go. I don't think you see a trickle down effect to organizations and WBC down the road of them not letting their guys go. This wasn't a situation where he was overused and hurt on the field. It was a freak accident celebrating a win.
Yeah, and I agree with Will on this, Jenny. But I will say, as a former GM, I hated when my players went to the World Baseball Classic because I didn't want to see the injuries. You know, on Sunday we saw Freddie Freeman with a hamstring pull, a slight pull. But, you know, if you're the Los Angeles Dodgers, that's a key part of your team. And you hate to see the injury when the player's not with you. You know, the Mets invested $102 million on Edwin Diaz, and now they're not going to have him this year. And it's difficult kind of as a former GM to tell you it's difficult to deal with, but you have to look at it from a global perspective. Is this good for the game? Is it good to sell this game internationally? And the answer to that is yes. And the other thing is players are going to get injured in spring training just like they're going to get injured in the World Baseball Classic. So it doesn't matter if Diaz is getting injured there or in spring training. It's part of the game. It happens. It's the risk that we all know is part of it. And I do think the Baseball Classic is going to continue. I think it's positive. Baseball's never been able to participate at this type of level in the Olympics because that's the season that Major League Baseball plays. And so this is phenomenal. All you have to do is ask Mike Trout, ask Mookie Betts what this World Baseball Classic has meant for them. It's unbelievable to watch the vibe last night at Lone Depot Park in Miami. It was sold out, and you felt like it was Game 7 of the World Series. And that's the same atmosphere that we're going to see tomorrow night when Puerto Rico takes on Mexico. Same atmosphere we're going to see on Saturday when the United States takes on Venezuela. This is good for the sport. Injuries, unfortunately, as Will Middlebrooks knows himself, it's just part of the game.
It is part of the game, whether it happens at the World Baseball Classic, it happens at spring training, but I think we can all agree the energy, the atmosphere that this World Baseball Classic is bringing us in March is just getting us hyped up for baseball season, and it's just unfortunate that the injury happened. That's Jim Bowden, Will Middlebrooks with the latest on New York Mets closer Edwin Diaz carrying that patellar tendon in his right knee during the World Baseball Classic celebration. He will miss the rest of the season. As we take a look at the odds to win the World Series right now, the Mets are at plus 800. You got to wonder if those odds are going to change with this injury.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.